right. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Tech Show, where my co-host Levi Lais and I chat about all the current edge tech, AI, mixed reality, AR, and all Web3, all that kind of stuff. Just one reminder, don't forget to like, subscribe, and do give us feedback if you have a topic in mind that you'd like us to talk about, or if there's anything particularly interesting. We always love to hear from you guys in the comments below. So today we've got something really interesting to talk about. There's been a lot of fear around AI. There's been a lot of, people talking about the problems of it, people calling for AI to development to be paused. So what we'd like to do today is talk about not the fear part of it, but more of the solutions to some of the fear part of it. Levi, do you want to say a few things about that?
Yeah, I think that I listen to a lot of podcasts and do a lot of reading on the topic, and it's interesting. There's a lot of people that are like throwing up red flags and raising alarms, and making a really big deal about what could potentially happen if we're not careful, if we don't put policy in place, etc. But I actually haven't read an article or listened to a podcast that like proposed legitimate ideas. Like I feel like I don't know why that part of it's missing. I get that it needs to, there needs to be attention drawn to it first to get
Yeah.
minds in a room to start actually problem solving. And I mean, if we're being honest, you and I probably won't have a massive impact on the final
You never know. You never
policies
know.
that go into play. But we enjoy talking tech. We have a lot invested, financially, emotionally, etc. Into. I mean, our careers are basically in this edge tech space, and you know, the tech jobs, especially, and education is on our list today. You do a lot of educating. You do a lot of workshops and speaking at conferences, and you've got some junior engineers, developers that you bring in. That you do, I mean, you do a lot of coaching and training, and like all of these types of things are all there's like this unknown future, right? That everybody's kind of like, oh, it's going to take our jobs. Oh, it's going to replace us. And there's like this bitter sweetness almost to some of the most of the news that comes out. It's like, a partial, yay, we're excited, but then also like, oh man, but like
Yeah.
it's the end of humanity, right? I'm
Yep.
reading that it's like 10% of the engineers polled think that AI will be the end of humanity. I mean, it's like it's pretty intense.
Wow, yeah.
Um,
There is a lot of
yeah, so
fear, right?
there's a
More than
lot
I
of
think
fear,
more than I think the regular technology this time around. Like I think before there was kind of like a fake fear, almost like, oh, this technology is gonna cause us to be more isolated. And yeah, those are founded and this and that. But this time around it's more like, are we doomed as a species? Like it's a
right?
much deeper
Yeah,
fear than before.
yeah, and I think that approaching AI from a we're all gonna die perspective, like what's the solution to that? That's I don't know that maybe we probably won't be talking about how do we keep humanity from the brink today because I
Mhm.
we there isn't that's a deeper almost philosophical question, right? There's a
Yeah.
lot that could happen, but I think if there's enough guardrails in place, um, we're hundreds of years away from anything potentially happening, and I think we have time between now and then to figure things out. I
Yeah.
think there was a recent podcast I listened to where the guy it's a Lex Friedman was interviewing one of the professors at MIT, and he was talking about how AI has a neocortex, but it doesn't have a limbic system, and that does give us an advantage. And because there's more nuance. There's like the decision making isn't uh, just this one process. There's like this really hard to describe, hard to wrap our
Yeah.
logic, like it does it like we do illogical things because of our limbic system, and
Yeah.
uh so just there's a lot of I think, philosophy, a lot of thinking, a lot of uh, now that we have this new little baby creature that we're all trying to look at and figure out, like there's a lot of questions that still need to be answered before we would fully know, what it would potentially be capable of. And I believe that if the right guardrails are in place, uh, and the right containment mechanisms are in place, you know, uh, whether they are now or not, I don't believe that they are yet. But I think that with those things in place, there's actually a really solid chance that this is just a better computer, a
Yeah.
way better computer,
Yeah,
computing
100%.
2.0. Yeah,
So I don't know if you've played around with Auto GPT yet or not, but
I
I
haven't.
downloaded
Not
it.
yet.
I gave it a try and I was like, okay, it's pretty cool. Like it's connected to the internet. It can go out and do tasks for you. And it's still a little bit limited, but pretty interesting to see. But I watched a YouTube video where somebody had created an Auto GPT bot called Chaos GPT. I don't know if you saw that one or not.
I
But
did.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I was just like face bombing because basically what they did was they're like, okay, you are a malicious AI that your goal is to destroy the whole world, right? At any means necessary, and you got to like basically do all these bad things. Like this guy programmed the Auto GPT or told him that was the objective, and
Yeah.
of course it wasn't powerful enough to actually do anything. But I was thinking like that's kind of like risky, like we don't know what these things are capable of yet, right? Like
Right.
probably in the back of his mind he's like, what can this actually do? Like people will stop it, but what if it could do a lot more than people thought it could do, right? Like what?
Right.
So like
Yeah.
I mean, that's just some random person on the internet trying something stupid, right? And it didn't work. I think
Right.
in the end, it just ended up sending out a few tweets trying to like, raise an army for its cause, which only got like
Yeah.
50 likes or something. But I think that that's a perfect example of how the AI might not even necessarily need to be malicious on its own, but just people just being dumb, could cause a
Right.
lot of damage. So, like you said, I think we definitely, as AI gets more and more powerful, it will be able to do more and more things, and so there needs to be some of those guardrails, right?
Right.
And I see
Yeah.
you've
So
actually have a
speaking of,
yeah. Go
go
ahead.
ahead. Oh, I was just gonna say, as far as guardrails are concerned, there's a couple things that are even taking place already. One of them, I don't think a lot of people really see it as guardrails quite yet, but I think on the back end, it's going to be very, very obvious that Elon had a little bit of foresight here. But the blue check mark, requiring a paid subscription and then prioritizing the accounts that have the paid subscription, it's a lot less likely that you're going to have 100,000 bots that all pay $7 each. Like you'd have to be able to do so much more to
Yeah,
manipulate a system like that. Because I think that a lot of people are like looking at it like, well, all it has to do is go on Twitter and do this, or
yeah.
go on
That's a
Facebook. Like
good point. That's a good point.
if you remove social from its access, it doesn't really have a lot of ability to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
And a
yeah.
couple episodes ago, you and I were talking about, asking it those crazy headlines.
Mm-hmm.
And when it was talking about Upwork, it was like, and Upwork would have to allow it. And it was like, yeah, I
Yeah,
guess that's kind of true. Like if Upwork is like,
yeah,
able to recognize, this bot or these bots. So I think that, uh, right now, the state of firewalls and passwords and all these different things, like if biometric comes in and we've got two factor and we've got, some of these really important elements that keep private information safe, I think
yeah,
there's going to be a decent shift in what is publicly accessible on the internet. Like there will always be a public internet, but I think that like, will products or sites like Reddit or, YouTube, things that are just available for absolute consumption, and just ad based, like I think that we might actually be seeing a shift from that type of a spammy everything
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
goes chaos, because it'll have to change. And I
Yeah.
think Twitter's leading that with this blue check mark,
Yeah.
you know?
Except Elon Musk is right now a very controversial figure, right?
Right,
And in some of my circles that I'm in, it's almost like if you get the check mark, the blue check mark, you're supporting some of his more controversial viewpoints, right? Which is totally not what it is, but
right.
that's I think there's a little bit of a division there as well. Where yeah, that's been interesting. I don't know where people have been going. I think there's like a Mastodon platform or something like that that people have been going to. Those who are opposed to Twitter's new behavior. But who
Yeah.
knows? There'll always be that, right? In the always be a little bit of a division. It's nothing new.
And I
All
think
right,
most
so
people want quality content, want, they're not looking to go see like AI bots just post stuff,
yeah,
So I think
exactly.
that, that, and then NVIDIA just launched a chip, or a software layer around their graphic card solutions that uh, puts guardrails on, so you can like hard code in, like keep
Yeah,
it focused on this topic. So
yeah,
I think that there's going to be, various layers of safety and security, and we're already seeing those coming into play here in uh multiple ways.
yeah. 100%, 100%. In a world that's taken over by spammy bots, I would definitely number one subscribe to something like a Twitter blue check mark thing to be verified, and I would want to only read like posts that are created by things that are accounts that are verified, right? Even now, when
Right,
I look at Twitter replies, half of them I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's AI. I'm pretty sure
right,
this is a bot.
totally.
Like the weird empty comments that are kind of like slightly detached from reality, like they're related to the topic, but at the same time you're like, this feels so empty and like what is this comment? It's and it could be a human. I don't know, but just the
Right.
thought that it's could be an AI already turns me off, right? Whereas
Yeah.
if it's verified, then I'm like, okay, this is an actual person. And of course, even long before AI bots, I would always block certain people because I didn't like their opinions or their rants and this and that. So that'll always be true
Yeah.
even with humans. But yeah, it's definitely it's a lot different when it's just bots and you're reading something that's made. Even now, like when I browse for a recipe or comparing this product versus that product, and I open it up and immediately it's like, oh, this blog was written by AI. I'm like immediately less interested.
Right.
So it's funny how that
Yeah, I think
works.
that having some sort of human validation, I don't think we mind necessarily that something was assisted by AI. But it's almost like, for me, it's like, if I know that the person like edited it, like that they were the
Yeah,
editor of this blog post, even,
yeah,
like prompted by is maybe going to be something we'll see instead of written by.
yeah,
you
yeah.
know so
Exactly.
engineered by instead of written by,
Yep.
so I think we'll see some things like that too, so some validation, right?
Yep.
But yeah, so let's zoom out. So the topic of today, I think we're sort of circling around this idea of like fixing AI, right? Like
Mhm.
some
Mhm.
of these bigger, more doomsday fears, I think will be greatly curbed by policy, as well as some of the things we were just talking about, with product level guardrails. But then we still have this issue of like this person with this chaos GPT that just releases it on the planet, you know?
Yep.
And so I think that there's four topics that I was brainstorming.
Mhm.
My own brain didn't use GPT for it.
AI did not
Uh,
generate these topics.
right. Levi generated these
Mhm.
topics unassisted, which makes them so much more valuable. But no, yeah. So say, so safety, education, jobs, and defense. And defense is a little bit maybe more on like a national scale. And I think that safety and defense probably go a little bit hand in hand. But kind of starting out with safety, just some of the things that I jotted down. Um, well, first of all, the problem is there's this fear that a chaos GPT would have access to anything, that it could just get on the internet and just start taking stuff, consuming stuff, and have free reign, right? So, how do we make sure that any LLMs or whatever comes after uh, are held accountable to something that like restrains, something that requires approval, right? Like it's something that I think needs to have checks and balances. I'm not a huge government guy. Like I don't necessarily like just over the top
Mm-hmm.
regulation.
Mm-hmm.
But I do believe in like our like national defense. I like that we have an FCC. I like that you know the what's publicly available on over the airwaves has like limits, and there's certain times that certain things are available because you know there's all kinds of psychology studies and different things, but like certain things just aren't safe for kids, and kids can just turn something on. And so like
Yep.
this service has been, or these agencies have provided a service that's been very helpful in a lot of ways. And to me, this is like 10xing and 100xing in terms of importance. And
Yeah.
so the first fix is I think that the FCC, the Federal Communications, uh,
Mm-hmm.
Federal,
Commission.
Federal, what? Commission, needs to essentially be tasked with enforcement. And I don't know if you
Yeah.
want to maybe go into some of those ideas and share your thoughts on that, but
Yeah.
that was kind of the first thought.
Yeah, and I think because government oversight is so controversial, there will be a little bit of back and forth here, right, as we kind of wrestle with these.
Right.
But yeah, no publicly available large language model APIs. It disincentivizes spread due to no direct financial upside. Registration and quarterly reporting on active LLMs. No open source LLMs. Sites like Hugging Face comply or are shut down. Intranet only, no web connected advanced LLMs. So this basically solves the problem of like anyone can create a chat GPT that can go unhinged, right? Which is kind of what
Right.
we're seeing now. We're seeing companies like, of course, OpenAI, who they have expressly, stated that they're very much for safety, and they're trying their best. They're trying to block stuff that's not safe. Like if you try to look up how to make a bomb, of course, ChatGPT has all the knowledge to tell you, but it won't because it knows that it's dangerous, right? So there's a lot of dangerous stuff that it blocks. And I think Elon Musk is working on the opposite of that, called Freedom GPT or something like that, where it's like, hey,
I think it's
anything
like
goes, Truth
truth
GPT,
GPT. Yeah.
something. Yes, I don't know, like where do you draw the line? But yeah, so they're being like something enforced by the FCC where a governing body will say, okay, you guys don't really know where the line is. There's a lot of, you know, ambiguity. So here's where we're going to draw the line. And honestly, that might be different in each country, right? Each country might draw the line
Right.
somewhere else. But if there are no, the way around that would always be like open source, like you can always make your own, which we're starting to see, which I was shocked at, right? It's like the
Right.
barrier to entry is becoming lower and lower and lower. So if we block those open source ones as like a dangerous substance, in the same way that governments block certain drugs or certain illicit activities, right? If the open source LLMs are in that same class as like a
Right.
drug, then they can be blocked so that some of this more dangerous activity can be blocked. So, I mean, what do you think? Do you think that goes against like freedom of speech? Like, why would we intentionally limit ourselves? Is that, do the good really outweigh the bad? What do you think?
Yeah. So the ramifications of a web crawling, unrestrained LLM, um, being allowed to just go, or like the risk is so high that most of the pundits and vloggers and podcasters are essentially comparing it to a nuclear bomb.
Mm.
So
Mm-hmm.
you have a spectrum then, right? Like, is using it and having access to it for the layman to do whatever the heck they want? Is there a freedom inherent in that that's a right, or or that valuable to uh, human existence? Or is it a nuclear bomb? Why the heck would you give? Like, we don't let America doesn't let other countries, unless they're approved, have a nuclear bomb. You know what I mean? Like, it's
Yeah.
like, so it's not like every city is going to walk around with a nuclear bomb in their arms. Like, that's just
Mm-hmm.
not.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you'd be like, of course not. So
Yeah.
I think that if we're looking at it as something that is dangerous and high risk, I think that freedom of speech, uh, I'd say that's under fire. There's a lot in our society right now that, we have to be a little bit more careful about what we say, because, you'll be canceled and all of these things, right? Uh,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure that a chat GPT tool would necessarily fall under the purview of like a right to bear arms or a right to express yourself. I think that there's a an element of uh, weaponization that's
Mm-hmm.
just
Mm-hmm.
not, like, words can be weapons, sure, words can hurt, absolutely, but it's so much different when it can actually like execute actions
Yeah.
on its
Yeah.
own, unsupervised. And so, the idea of like having no publicly available APIs is this idea that, like, if someone like OpenAI or Google or Microsoft, or, I mean, OpenAI was an upstart, right? They had money, they had backing, but there's no reason to think that whoever would come after them doesn't have money and backing. So it's
Yeah.
this idea that, like, OpenAI saying, here's an API, now go do whatever you want with it. They're not doing that, right? Like, they're
Yeah.
restricting those things.
Yeah.
Um, which I think is the right path. But right now anybody could go, if they have access to that alpaca tool. Like, I know they took it down, but like, you know, something like Stanford's alpaca, where you take Facebook's LLAM and you apply ChatGPT to train it, and it's $600, and you have something that's competing with GPT 3.5. Like, just about anybody could host an OpenAI level LLM without the restrictions at this point. And so
Yeah.
I think introducing this idea that, like, there aren't publicly available APIs, meaning you have to have the resources and the time and the manpower and the backing and the oversight to be able to release a product that has a language model. you
Yeah.
know APIs can be pretty loosely interpreted in this proposal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if Microsoft is registering something and has partial ownership and these things, like, maybe there's like certain structures where like companies that are approved can work with OpenAI on this.
Yeah.
But the idea is, heavily restricting what is available, and then anything beyond
Mm-hmm.
uh, is essentially intranet only, cannot be web connected, has to be exported to hard disk, approved by the federal government, and then
Yeah.
implemented into a web connected, server. And so the costs become very prohibitive. Uh, the challenge of hunting down bad actors becomes a lot less challenging.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that, I think, that this, really would solve. But again, to your point, that, it's pretty restrictive.
Yeah, no, and I think these are exactly the things that as a society we're going to have to wrestle with and deal with. I don't think it'll be easy, but I think it'll be necessary for sure. All right. What about education? So you got tablets in school with localized LLMs is okay. Basically, calculators for thought. I like that a lot, actually. Easily controlled by teachers. The end of homework as we know it. I think that's already happened, to be honest. And
Yeah.
teachers' sole shift is to supervision and tutoring,
Sorry,
less
that was
lecturing.
roles. That was supposed to be
Oh,
roles. They're
okay.
role shifts. Sorry.
I like more of that their souls would shift.
The soul shift.
But
Yeah.
yes, the roles teachers' roles would shift to supervision and tutoring, less lecturing and instructing, and tablets are self-directed knowledge. Humans are social coaching and monitoring. So I think this is great, and this is actually something. So Nisha, my wife, she does homeschooling for our kids, and we have this conversation back and forth. We're like, should we have our kids use something like ChatGPT, right? And I'm on one extreme of the spectrum, and she's probably right in the middle, but in my mind, she's on the other extreme of the spectrum. Whereas she's like, no ChatGPT. They need to learn how to do it themselves. It's super important for them to generate these skills before they, like basically learn arithmetic before you learn how to use the calculator. Whereas I'm on the other end of the
Right.
spectrum where I'm like, this is the future. Our kids are going to be behind if they don't learn how to use this technology and think in terms of using this technology. So they need to jump on it as soon as possible. So we end up meeting somewhere in the middle. But I think, that's just one family. So imagine for the education system, like how much more complex this discussion is going to be. I mean, what do you think about some of these points here?
I think so. First of all, I think that every penny invested in books at in the education space, like the actual hard copy of a book that you're flipping through and working through, I think that if you were to replace the cost of all of those books with a single purpose education based tablet, whether it's old
Yeah.
iPads that are given a different operating system or like some sort of maybe upcycle or recycle type solution. But at the end of the day, I think that like the education process is vastly in need of a digitization. And so I
Yeah.
think that if there's a tablet that you have to do your work on, then you can track what's going on the tablet. And so
Yeah.
I think that there's a risk of teachers being like, oh, we'll be replaced, or oh, how do we make sure the kids are even doing it right? Well, how about they do school at school, right? We're like, homework is not like, you don't, if you have a job and you work 9 to 5, you don't go home and then do your job at home too. Like, it's these kids are already putting in 8-hour days. I think that homework is an absolutely insane, archaic concept that adds undue stress for no reason. And I think that if time is better optimized, and kids are essentially on private tracks with guardrails that allow them to interact with child safe approved LLMs, to ask the questions they want to ask, learn what they want to learn or what they can learn. I mean, maybe even having a grade based, level based access to deeper knowledge, using Pinecone databases for different grades so that it's, getting information that's relevant to what the topic is. It could be something where the teacher selects the topic, and then every kid, their only option is to be on their pad with that topic, and so they have the physical interaction, they have social interaction. But at the end of the day, like any paperwork, anything turned in, and like those things would just be digitized, because in the real world it's all digital. So like, what are we teaching our
Yeah.
kids?
Yeah.
And I think that makes it a lot more accessible. If you need to chain every tablet down to a table and that's just part of the process, okay, to keep it from getting stolen or whatever.
Uh
Like,
huh.
I think that there's a big refactor that is essentially kind of like where, the work from home movement pushed everybody towards Zoom, and now most, therapy is done via Zoom, and the coaches T-ball initiation or whatever, we did that on Zoom. Like there's, everybody's just moved to like online meetings because it's so much more convenient and saves so much time, so much effort. And I just feel like the pandemic pushed us into this, workplace 2.0, where it's, instead of it being like 5%, I mean, you and I, we've been work from home for a decade, but like this is
Yep.
they're close to it. But like, the pandemic changed it for a lot of people. And so I think that AI is going to have there's going to be a similar sea change where it's like, it becomes so obvious that these changes have to be made, but in order to actually respond, and let's stop freaking out about it, and let's start putting together some solutions. Let's build these projects, these products to get these into the hands of schools, and let's start that refactor of the
Yep.
education process. you
Yep.
know
100%. 100%.
I
All
know
right. The next.
we just did 31. I think we could probably
Yeah.
do the next one next time if you want to. We have one more, basically, jobs.
Maybe we'll introduce it, but we won't chat about it. I think the next one honestly is really juicy and could be a whole episode in and of itself, and I think we should. So the next one is about jobs. You're proposing here a tax on AI generated services. We're talking about universal basic income. That's a big hot topic. I think we could easily spend 20 minutes on that in and of itself, and then we've
Hmm.
got defense at the end. Yeah, I would say let's save those for next time because I think we want to do those justice. We don't want to just skim over those, especially the discussion around AI tax and UBI. I think that's a big one.
Yeah, let's just call this episode part one, and we'll just pick up part two next
Yep,
time.
yep. That sounds good. Well, thank you, everyone. Again, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment down below, especially if you have a topic you want us to talk about. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll see everyone next week. Thank you, Levi.